Okay, thanks, Professor Yu, for your efforts to organize this wonderful forum. Okay, let me go straight to the subject matter. Okay, we all see this topic is the conceptual viewpoint and the Chinese language. In order for me to explain anything, before I do any explanation, we should understand what conceptual viewpoint is and what is Chinese language. So here the conceptual viewpoint refers to the outlook of the world. So I guess you would get some sense of what is outlook of the world. That is how you view the world, okay? And the outlook of the world basically is a conditioning factor of a culture or of cultures, okay? So that's about the conceptual viewpoint and what is Chinese language. When we talk about the Chinese language, we usually use it as a cover term, okay? But here, what I mean is the Chinese language actually refers to the language spoken by the Han people, basically in the area of the Middle Plain. If you ever learned Chinese history or Chinese geography, you would know that. Okay. Okay, so now here is my viewpoint. Now this seems something to do actually, when you talk about the conceptual viewpoint, as I said a moment ago, is the conditioning factor of culture. Then it seems that this subject matter has something to do with the culture, right? Okay, I got a question here. Does language have anything to do with the culture, or on the other way around, does culture have anything to do with language? So, how about that? Now, how about Moeling? Would you please let me know? Tell me in English, of course, not in Chinese. So, does language have anything to do with the culture, or culture have anything to do with language?
I would say language definitely has something to do with culture, and I would say both.
Okay, in what way?
Because, I mean, I guess, I know in your class we talk about certain ways that you speak Chinese, like, relates how the Chinese people look at the world. Mm-hmm. So the way that they communicate kind of should, and like the way that how what comes first is because of what you put emphasis on, and how that's like, the way that they look at it,
okay,
as opposed to the way we speak, which is different.
So you mentioned how the Chinese people look at the world, right? So my question is, in order for us to answer that question, we should know what culture is. Yesterday, actually not yesterday, on Wednesday, one of my students told me when he came back from the LSAT, from Tianjin, somebody asked him about what the Chinese culture is. He found it extremely difficult to answer that question. So, is that food? The Chinese food is a part of the culture? Or the costumes? Are those things a part of the culture? Or they are the culture, actually? Or the way they behave? Or let's say there were dances in the street, the way they dance. Are those things a culture? Are they or are they not? It seems nodding there. Is food culture?
Yes.
Yes. You think it is, right? Why do you think food is culture?
It's something that distinguishes one people from another. The way they prepare their food,
mm-hmm,
the things that it's made out of, whether it's beef or pork or vegetables.
Okay. What you see actually, for me, is just a symptom. Those things that are called symptoms are not culture itself. Because you have to ask the fundamental reason why they have food this way, why they dance this way, why they behave this way, what determines they behave like that. Come in, please. So, all these symptoms are determined, all the reflections of their conceptual viewpoints about the world. Now, here we say, if, say, culture has something to do with the language, okay, most people think about when we have language class, we should have something like culture accompanying our class To me, that is not the way we do it, because I believe language is part of the culture. In terms of people's conceptual viewpoints, it's inseparable. You cannot separate language from culture. It's a part of a human cognition. Why should I say so? Usually people think when you learn a foreign language, you just learn another set of coding or another set of grammar, which is different from your native language, right? But we share the same viewpoint about the world. Is that true? Let's think about something. Unfortunately, I have to walk here to change it. So now we know the answer is language has something to do with culture, and the culture has something to do with language. Okay, and the language is a part of a culture. But let me show you how, some example. Now here, when you want to know somebody's last name, right? What would you say in English? You want to know somebody's last name. How would you say? What's the question? You form a question for me. Okay, what is your last name? Is that correct? But for those who are learning Chinese, all know that the Chinese expression is not like that. The Chinese uses a verb instead in noun. Is that right? The Chinese use 姓. That's a single verb. So you see here the difference is that in English, you treat the last name as something concrete, static. But in Chinese, it's something dynamic and volitional. Why do I say that? Because you can say, 我姓 this, I don't like to 姓 that. So, in this way, do we still think? Okay, the speakers of the two different languages share the same view about the world. They have totally different conceptions. Is that correct? In English, you have verb to be a noun, right? It's a static situation because it's a constant state. But in Chinese, it's a dynamic situation which changes along the axis of time. So that is a simple example, actually, we encounter every day to show you how different we view the external world. So the so-called conceptual viewpoint is obtained through our human beings' interaction with the physical world. Because of the difference of history and the geographical environment, I mean the immediate geographical environment, you got a different viewpoint. Let's see something else. So we say language is motivated and regulated by culture in terms of conceptual viewpoints. So it's motivated and it's regulated. It is not just associated with culture. Now, take a look at my name. Here, you have the same fact. Somebody has a last name and has a first name. But in English, what would you say? You say, Wenze, which is my first name, and who is my last name. But in English, the order is first name, first, last name, last. But how about Chinese? The Chinese, the last name is first, and first name, last. Why so? No, it's not just a matter of word order. What I'm asking is why is so? You have the same physical reality. Why in English you have this word order, but in Chinese you have that word order? What do they reflect? Yes?
The English seem to place more emphasis on individuals, while the Chinese seems to place more emphasis on the family.
Right. That on the surface, it seems that you are perfectly correct. But there was something deeper than that. There's something much deeper than that. It seems from this word order, just as what you said a moment ago, it seems that the English word order focuses on the individual. Actually, it focuses on the individuality. Once you identify this individual, then place this person into that group you associate with. But in Chinese, you view it entirely differently. You view this who as a group, right? And this Wenzi is just a member of it. But where does this difference come from? There were two principles actually governing our behavior in this world. The very fundamental one. One is your conception about space. The other one is your conception about time, without which we human beings cannot even survive because you cannot find food. Right? Without reference about where you are, could you find food? You cannot. Now, this is not just something we human beings share, even the entire animal world. Have to have that, right? You have to have that viewpoints about the physical world. But don't expect there's a one-to-one correspondence in between the physical world and your conception. Because, as I said a moment ago, because your history is different, your immediate geographical environment is different, your interaction with the world will be different. Therefore, you come up with a crystallized conception. Now, let's first take a look at what do we mean by here. You have two pictures. Let me tell you what you see here. I think that's very simple, right? It's not something difficult. What do you see?
It's a diamond.
What is that?
A diamond.
A diamond. Okay, that is a diamond, right? What else do you see from this picture? It's a square. So why it is a diamond at the same time a square? Why is that? Because this diamond or this square, whether it is a diamond or a square, is conditioned by the external frame, right? The external frame set up the background for your categorization of whatever inside. And this one basically determines your viewpoint about this. Of course, you can highlight this part. Okay. Logically, there are two ways to do it. You can start from this to the external ground. Or you can start from here to this, right? But for the Chinese, it happens to be, it starts from the frame to the internal diamond or square. So, but this one is called figure, and the external one is called ground. The relationship between the ground and the figure is that the ground determines your categorization of the figure. Now look at that. This is a diamond for sure. There's no ambiguity. It's determined because it is determined by its ground, right? So you see here? In the Chinese conception, it always starts from this ground to that figure. That's why, if we go back, you see my name. The last name is placed first because it represents a larger category which categorizes my first name. It tells you this one is something belonging to that category. This is not only reflected in my name, but also reflected in the entire Chinese language structure and also the social structure, also the family structure. In Chinese, basically, The larger category always precedes the smaller category. That is why, okay? As a member of the family, my family plays before myself. In the society precedes a family, okay? The country, the statehood precedes societies. And the Chinese society basically is the expansion of Chinese family, because you can detect that, you can discern that from the language itself. Why? How would you, what's the term for country in Chinese? 国 what? 国家. So, in order to understand the social phenomena in Chinese, actually you can learn something from the language itself. It is 国家, right? So within a family, are you talking about, last semester I remember somebody came here, talk about the legal system of China, who mentioned the rule of law never existed, okay, in the Chinese thinking. Why so? He did not ask that question. He gave us a lot of symptoms, a lot of facts. But he did not ask a fundamental question, why is so? Within family, do you talk about the law? Do you talk about the coding? No. You negotiate. You talk. You compromise. You don't even have a chance to elect your father and the mother. Is that correct? So, would you expect election of your father? No, you don't do that. You don't even you want to. Okay. But let's leave that aside. Let's go on. Now we give you more examples. We have a simple fact: many books in the library. In English, we have two sentences. One is the library has many books. The other one is there are many books in the library. Which one is the preferred one in English?
Either.
Which one?
Number one.
Number one. That's your opinion. Number two. How many think number two is the one, and how many think number one is? Now, let me see. Number one. Give me a hand. Okay, how about number two? It seems the number two has it. Now, I didn't say, okay, I said many books, the library, right? Actually, this one will be the preferred. It does not mean that in English you do have both strategies. You do have both strategies. The matter is which one is the preferred one. In Chinese, the first one is the preferred one. It is the preferred one not because it's grammatically required. It is because it's conditioned by your conception about the world. The library represents a larger category, and the books just what it is contained. Okay. Something else. This is the conceptual principle in Chinese. The first one, a very important one, is containing and a contained relationship. The contained basically is what I mentioned, the ground. The contained is the figure. Okay? It's always so. You cannot change that. Because it is determined by your conceptual viewpoint about the world. It does not mean to say, okay, if you choose the other way around, then it is wrong. There's nothing about it right or wrong. It just happened to be. The Chinese people chose that principle. For many other nations, many speakers of other languages, they are fully free to select the other way around. Okay? But the problem is that if you try to interpret a language like this in terms of the way of being a from the other way around, then you are doomed. No matter how correct the grammar is. So, as I said, as I mentioned the example a moment ago, my last name is so and so is entirely different from 我姓 so and so. If you try to interpret that in terms of English, even if you get the, it seems that you get the meaning, you didn't get the essence. Okay, something else. Since once we talked about the conceptual principle, okay, let's say the spatial conceptual principle, I think it wouldn't be very difficult for you to figure out, okay, how would you arrange, why they are different, right? Those two sentences. You know that's about address, right? In English, you have to say what? Windsor Who first, right? Language Studies Department, U.S. Naval Academy, Annapolis, MD. But for Chinese, you have to do this. MD, Annapolis, U.S. Naval Academy, Language Studies Department. And you have to change the word order here. It's Who, Windsor, instead of Windsor Who. Now, let's come to temporal viewpoint. Okay, time. The concept about time is extremely important in the four-dimensional space. Are you familiar with the notion of four-dimensional space? Yes, right? So you have height, width, depth, another one. Time. Time is a metaphor of space. That is why we say no one can cross the same river. Outside the river, I think you've been crossing that river every day. Is that correct? But are you crossing the same river? No, because each day is different. But because time is linear, is one way. It only goes ahead, never comes back. Okay? So when you get rid of all three dimensions, what is left is time. Logically, let's take a look at this one. This fact, Mary and David did homework. They were together. They did it yesterday. That's the fact. A very simple fact. What's the English? Give me one sentence. A grammatical English sentence. How do you say that? How do you say that in English?
Mary and David did homework together yesterday.
Excellent. Mary and David did homework together yesterday, right? How about the library? Do we have a library? No, we don't. Okay? Mary and David did homework together yesterday. Good, great. What would you expect the Chinese would say? Yesterday. Why yesterday is placed at the beginning?
So the time.
It is time because of its time, so it is placed at the beginning?
Without time, they can't have.
Good. That's what I taught you. Okay? Without the time frame. The first party placed time at the beginning because that is something to do with space, not with time itself. Okay? Time, the existence of time, even before you are born. You are irrelevant to the Chinese. The time must be there first. Space must be there. Their existence, okay, is not influenced by your existence. So you have the Chinese that is here. Yesterday, David and Mary together do homework. But why together is placed before work? Because without being together, how could you do your work? I already gave you the fact, right? So you have to be together first, but in English, you treat it as one single event. However, in Chinese, actually, think about that. The Chinese treat it as two separate events just posed together in sequence along the axis of time, could you still say the Chinese and the English-speaking people share the same viewpoint about the world? Entirely different. So the translation of Mary and David did the homework yesterday does not convey the intended message of this one, because there were two events here, and not just one. There were two. Okay. Now this basically is the principle. In Chinese, whatever occurs in the natural world occurs in a sentence first. Whatever occurs second occurs in the sentence second. It follows the temporal sequence of a time. Okay. Answer that question. How did you come? Don't tell me you drive here. Don't tell me, okay, you walk here. You came here using a tool, a bike, let's say that. How would you say? You would say, I came here by bike. Is that right? But in Chinese, what would you say? You say, I ride bike, come. Again, two juxtaposed events arranged along the axis of time. You have to ride the bike first, then you come. If you change the word order, then you change the entire sequence of events. If you ask to write a report or of it, the intelligence you collected. If you change the word order, you give the wrong information, maybe you jeopardize the whole campaign. Right? Is that right? It's not just a matter of grammar. Actually, Chinese grammar is quite easy to understand. Why? It's a transparent reflection of the Chinese people's conception. But in order for you to do so, you have to understand what the Chinese conception about space and the time is about. Okay, what I'm talking about is not just fabricated by some kind of people who call themselves linguists. This is noted by Chinese people a long time ago. This is a piece of a record from Chunqiu. Basically, it's a record about 770 to 476 BC. How many of you are from history department? So none of the students are from a history department, right? You heard about Chunqiu?
Yeah.
Okay, somewhat, right? Okay. This is the first record in the world about a meteor, okay, falling from the sky to the earth. Basically says, let us first look at the word order, okay? Spring, king, first moon. The king first moon is first month, okay? Wu Shen is the date. Then, 4 stone to Song. Song is the state of Song. 5. The second line, that month. 6 E. E is the word for a kind of a bird. The 6 E bird. Backward fly across Song capital. I wouldn't give you the Chinese because I hope that you would understand that later. Okay. I do have the Chinese here. Okay, I wouldn't give it to you until you reach that level. Okay. Now, could you explain to me why this is the order, not something else? Actually, the Gongyang commentary, okay, which is commentary or say a companion to the Chunqiu, okay, history. Actually, there are many commentaries. Gongyang is one of them. Okay. The Gongyang commentary gives an explanation. Take a look here. It says, stone falling from the sky is a record of hearsay. You heard about that story, okay? So in the story, one hears that's the sound of a stone falling on the ground. Okay? After one looks at them, one knows they are stones. After examining them, one finds them to be 5 in number. Let's go back to take a look. We know spring is placed first because it's time frame, right? And the king first month, okay, is a smaller category, okay, belonging to the spring. Then, 戊申 is the date. For that, the Gongyang explanation basically is about this part, 4 stone to stone 5. Why you mention stone first? Because you first see stone. Then you count the stones, you know there are 5. Not the other way around. So this sentence basically involves 2 principles. One is spatial, the other is temporal. The second one, that month 6 backward fly crossed the Song capital. You have, why does it first mention 6 but E second? Because when you look up into the sky, you see 6 something there. Okay? Then after careful examination, you find out they're birds. Then you say 6E instead of E6. Okay. After examining them, you then find them to be the birds of E. Slowly examining them, you find out they are flying backwards. So, you see, long time ago, even thousands of years ago, the Chinese people already realized, okay, their language is motivated, actually is in line with their perception about the world. Some more examples. Those about the time and space. Let me give you another one more interesting Chinese viewpoint about the best. In English, okay, our students are so fancy. I don't know why they so like to use great, excellent, I'm the top. But your teachers never, very rarely use those terms. Why so? Okay. Take a look at this picture. Actually, I left out one line, which is time, which goes that way. Okay? Now this guy is on top of this mountain. Now he's the best, right? And there's a second person here. Now, what do you think the future for the best? What do you think? You're doomed. No matter which way you go. But for the second one, always got some room to maneuver, to survive. Is that simple? It's a philosophical, but also very simple. That's why in Chinese they're saying, if you're a bird, right? You're the first to fly out. You're the first to be killed. So, let me sum it up, okay, wrap it up. Language learning actually should and can achieve more than just having a chance to learn a practical skill, especially at the college level. In fact, from my experience, what fascinates students most in learning a foreign language is when they discover ways of categorizing experience and packaging information in the targeted language, okay, which are different from what they take for granted in their own native language. So learning a foreign language, therefore, students have a chance to access an alternative way to look at the world and develop a more objective attitude toward perspective, multiplicity, and a deeper understanding of cultural diversity. Thank you all. I'd like to entertain some questions. look at me that way.
First bird.
Okay, you're the first to be killed. Yeah.
When like looking at Western news outlets like major newspapers and TV, all the time, they're talking about China and talking about Chinese news said so and so, or Chinese news reported so and so. As a linguist or a native speaker, how do you feel a lot of these major U.S. or Western news sources do in translating what the original meaning really is?
What's the big difference? Basically, you cannot get the original message from the translation. I never count on that. So in order for you to understand what is going on, you have to use that language. If you try to understand the Chinese culture, please read the original text instead of a translation. The same thing is true. When you learn Chinese history, you better read that in Chinese. Because I just showed you that example, right? In Chinese, there were 2 events or 3 events, but in English, it is just 1. So how do you deal with that? You cannot interpret say a different language in terms of your own. Any other questions? Yes.
Sir, there has been like an evolution of the Chinese language over time, like from the ancient literal speak, the Wenyan went to the nowadays the Baihua went, the common speak. Do you think there's like an evolution of these ideas, or is it like adaptation?
No, actually, the surface part changed a lot, but the fundamental structure has not changed that much. Okay, we got evidence to show that. You change the structure, but later people have a reinterpretation along with the conceptual viewpoints. You just reinterpret it. Yes?
Do you think the fundamental viewpoint has been influenced by religions and belief systems in China?
No. It's influenced by the experience when they deal with the world. You know, in the Chinese history, China does not have a single god. Basically, it worships the multi-gods. Okay? Yes?
So in that case, if it wasn't influenced by like the higher being belief,
No.
was it, do you think, influenced by like, the economy, like lifestyle, like working on a farm or living in a
The
city?
lifestyle.
Like how, what's the fundamental thing that influenced the way people
Think. Yeah. For example, if you don't have, if you are inlander, you've never seen ocean, your behavior must be different, will be different, and you are is different from those people who live basically adjacent to oceans. Right? So your behavior, your conceptual viewpoints are shaped by your interaction with the reality.
So what was the, like for example, the larger group to the smaller, like, and the sequential, like, belonging to a higher group?
Yeah.
What does that come from?
Oh, that is accidental because logically you got the 2 possibilities. One is from the smaller to the larger, right? The other one is from larger to the smaller. Of course, there is a 3rd possibility. That is in between. You start in the middle. Look at both sides. Unfortunately, nowadays, we have not discovered any nation, any culture exhibiting that kind of a trend. So for the Chinese, it happened to be they chose this starting point. But before that, it is not random. There's a reason. After that, there's a reason. But at that moment of selecting, we can say it's arbitrary. Yes?
Do you know if there's other, languages that kind of look at it in the same way? Or would you say that every language is different? Like, French and Spanish and
Mhm.
English are probably more similar.
Right, exactly. To the Chinese, they are the same language.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could I ask sort of the same question, but the other way around? Would
Yeah.
the language then influence the religions and belief systems?
It's possible, yeah. But basically, I would take the stand. Your conceptual viewpoints have a stronger influence on your language rather than the other way around. Because somebody else already said that. But he said from the other way around that is Sapir and Wolf. Sapir and Wolf said long time ago, it says language have impact on people's thinking. Therefore, some language are superior, some language are more backward. I don't take that kind of stand. Yes.
If the cultural conceptions were so mutually inscrutable to each other, what would you advise for child development purpose?
Yeah.
A infant who's learning languages, we're better off to start out with bilingual.
Yeah.
So Chinese and English, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So the kid might grow up confused.
Yeah.
And,
That's true.
or would you advise naturally to let this kid to start with one language, have a clear viewpoint,
Yes.
and when he grows mature,
Mhm.
and then he can better grasp the nuances and differences. Of
Actually, that would be my suggestion because I got many friends who got kids growing up with two languages. Okay, but at the first stage, the kid just treats the two languages as a single one. Well, I'll give you one example. A kid just around I think it's 1 year old. Okay, he starts to say somebody play with somebody. You need with in English, right? But in Chinese, you don't say that. So they say somebody play somebody, using the Chinese word for play. Okay, but English word for the other two. So, what do you think? Either language won't be accepted. That's the problem.
My mom said when I grew up, when I was little, I spoke very little.
Yeah.
She said it was probably because I was so confused.
Right. That's correct. So I'd rather have my child stick to one at a time.
Until what age do you think he can?
It's very hard to say. I'm not an expert in that area. However, I can only tell you based on my own experience. That's what I observed. But I don't have a theory about that. That's the problem.
I hope you're not suggesting those people who are actually bilingual kind of naturally give you.
I don't know about that. But however, there's one thing. They're bilingual, some are bilingual kids who went back to China, tried to find a job. But, what's the result? The native speakers from their Chinese are not good enough to survive. Even though they are considered bilingual here. I don't know how about their English. Native speakers can tell immediately whether you are native or not by a single utterance. Because you look at the world differently. It's so strange to them. Not because of whether you have a good grammar or not.
Do you think that China having so many different ethnic groups,
Right.
each one of those groups have a different viewpoint that kind of contributed, or do they all have?
Oh, no, not necessarily. The different ethnic groups, they are closely related.
So they would all
Right.
pretty much have the same.
Right.
cultural-
Yeah, they're very much closely, except for example, the Uyghur. They're Europeans, basically. They're different. But not within the Sino-Tibetan family. Any other questions? Yes. Don't worry.
based on your research, and then what practical advice would you give to the machine learning next class who are trying to study Chinese?
Yeah, in order, that's my advice. Actually, I already expressed that. I already said that. When you study this language, you have at the same time understand what is behind the scene. You need to be explicitly or overtly taught. Otherwise, you wouldn't get it. Okay, now thank you all. I really appreciate it.